So we're beginning. Very good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Theology and Culture from St. Bernard School of Theology and Ministry here in the lovely Albany campus. We are delighted to host the last installment of Theology and Culture from the Albany campus this semester. My name is Dr. Anthony Coleman. I'm the director of the Albany campus. I'm accompanied by my faithful colleague, Dr. Marco Stango, who's the campus manager here over in Albany. And tonight we have a wonderful presentation encounter for you today. Let me begin by actually giving a short presentation in relation to the history here of St. Bernard School of Theology and Ministry in Albany. Next slide. St. Bernard School of Theology and Ministry began, well, with those two handsome fellows, again, thank you for laughing, I made the same joke last month, began as the Diocesan Seminary for the Diocese of Rochester, and our mother campus is in Rochester. However, beginning in 1989, St. Bernard's established and developed a presence here in the Diocese of Albany by way of continued staff and support here in Albany. And in Albany, we not only provide education for lay formation, intellectual formation, but also in terms of diaconate formation and pre-seminary formation here for the diocese. So it's a special relationship that St. Bernard's even though we're located in Rochester, has had with the Diocese of Albany. And in addition to that, we serve students all across the country and all across the globe. We Zoom all of our classes so that even if you're a student in California or Oregon or Nigeria, you can actually participate in all of our classes live. And even if you can't, we can make accommodations for you to watch recordings. So here at St. Bernard's, in Rochester, we have a physical presence in Albany, but we really broadcast to the entire world. And with that, I will hand things over for a brief word over to my Director of Admissions, Mr. Matthew Brown.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm going to do a really smooth transition. I'm stealing the PowerPoint as we go to the slide that I'm starting on, if I can see this. Okay, everyone can see that, I'm hoping. Okay. All righty. So again, my name is Matt Brown, Director of Admissions here. I'm going to pick up where Anthony left off, and he already kind of was starting to talk about the history as a whole of St. Bernard School of Theology Ministry. Like he made mention, we used to be originally a seminary in Rochester, New York. It was a seminary for about 100 years, starting in the late 1800s. Since then, we've gone through some major changes and began educating the laity and lay ministers, as well as doing diaconate formation in the Diocese of Rochester and eventually Albany. Eventually, as the seminary closed in the early 1980s, we became a graduate school, now known as St. Bernard's School of Theology and Ministry, where, of course, like I said, we educate the laity, diaconate candidates all over the place, all over dioceses in upstate New York, as well as lead a pre-seminary, pre-theology program in the Diocese of Albany. It's really important that I point out too, and Dr. Coleman already made mention of this, but everyone in our academic programs, whether you're taking a course, auditing, whether you're in an event like this one right here, you can interact with us synchronously, meaning live via Zoom, from anywhere in the country, from everywhere all over the world. So this is what we refer to as our distance learning program. So real quick, I'm going to be real brief. Who are our students? Okay, well, currently we have about 100 students from the dioceses of Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and many scattered around the country. As I had just made mention to, our distance learning program has much to do with this. It also, certainly no secret that COVID, for I suppose both good and bad, has made our already virtual world even more virtual, right? So but this is greatly contributed to what we are already striving for with our integrated learning model in the classroom. So what does that mean? Well, any of our students, whether you are a pre-seminary, pre-theology student, a lay student, a diaconate, can take classes with any of those student groups at the same time. So this model allows the formation and education to take place alongside different groups of students, which will help foster a deeper community and a more dynamic human formation. So more concretely, our hope is to provide not just information, but formation. That is, a unifying of mind and heart made possible through a growing and understanding and love of our Lord. So what you have up here is our traditional master's program. So we have four primary graduate degree programs here: Master of Arts in Pastoral Studies, a Master of Divinity, a Master of Arts in Catholic Philosophy, and a Master of Arts in Theological Studies. As I said before, all of these graduate degree programs can be fully completed synchronously, live via Zoom, asynchronously, meaning watching the live recordings at a later date. And of course, the ideal format is in person or a combination of them all. So just for the sake of time, I normally go into a little bit more detail of them, but those are the standard degree programs that we offer. We also offer certificate programs. We just launched these, I always say the early this year, but it was actually last year, 2020, and they have been quite attractive for many people. So these are for many students who might be interested in a particular field, or maybe they want to add a certificate while they're pursuing a graduate degree to supplement their education. Real quick, we have a certificate in Catholicism and Fine Arts, a certificate in catechetical leadership, certificate in Catholic bioethics, certificate in Catholic philosophy, and our most recent one we just launched, a certificate in Catholic biblical studies. So most of these certificates are 4 or 5 classes in total. So you can complete these quicker than a traditional graduate degree program. And so far, these certificates have been very popular, and we hope that they can serve as a tool for the faithful, especially the laity. And real quick, these are, as you can see, some of our courses coming up, especially for the spring semester. To the middle right, Catholic bioethics, theology of the body, philosophy for theologians, and introduction to apologetics. So those are courses that are being offered in spring 2022. Philosophy for theologians and theology of the body are pretty brand new. I don't think they've ever been offered since I've been here anyways too. And then to the left as well, we have an open house. So sort of a bigger version of what I'm doing now at Albany and virtual. And that is next Wednesday. So please look for information. I think it's from 7 to 8, and you can sign up right on our website. And of course, the Theology and Culture which we have right now, and this is the last one for the semester. So again, my name is Matt Brown. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, email, call. I'm also, if you go to our website, I'm that guy that pops up on the screen. My ugly mug will pop up, and you can chat me as well. And usually I'm pretty responsive. So thanks again. Thank you, Dr. Coleman. And I look forward to hearing from Father Barratt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I appreciate that greatly. And I just want to build on 2 things that he said. One is, yes, we are having a virtual open house. Mr. Brown will be here in Albany next week, and we will broadcast that out just like we are doing Theology and Culture now. Please, anyone you think that might be interested in furthering their intellectual formation, please let us know within the RCDA, and then outside of the RCDA, they can do that virtually. And the second thing is, I mentioned this at the end of the talk last month. I will mention it now at this point. I just want to say thank you to all those who donated. Again, we broadcast this virtually, and we put on these events that are free of charge. But here in Albany, we want to provide some food, some drink, so that we really try and serve the communion here in the Diocese of Albany. And of course, that all costs money. So those of you that have donated, thank you so much. We appreciate that just immensely. And I won't belabor the point, but thank you. With that being said, again, as Mr. Brown mentioned, this is the final Theology and Culture event of this semester, and we are honored to have our own Father Anthony Barratt here to give this sort of consummation to all of these presentations. Father Anthony Michael Barratt studied for the priesthood at the Venerable English College in Rome, Italy. He was ordained as a priest of the Archdiocese of Southwark in England in 1985, and I know how to pronounce that because of my knowledge of British murder mystery television. quite frankly. And in May of 2011, to the great delight of where we currently stand, was incarnated into the Diocese of Albany, New York. He holds a license in sacred theology, summa cum laude, from the Gregorian University in Rome, Italy, a PhD from King's College, London, and he is a fellow of the Academy of Higher Education. He is a Knight Commander of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem and a Deputy Chaplain of the American Association of the Knights of Malta, as well as having been awarded the Cross of the Order of Merit of the Knights of Malta. Were you actually in the Crusades? Is my question.
I need a written notice.
He has been working in the Diocese of Albany, New York since 2004. He is currently the pastor of Holy Trinity Parish in Hudson and Germantown, the Episcopal Vicar of the Hudson Valley, and Director of Prayer and Worship for the diocese. He is also an adjunct professor of theology at St. Bernard's School of Theology and Ministry, and we're tremendously blessed for that, and an adjunct professor at Siena College here in New York. He holds a number of diocesan positions, including the Diaconate Formation Board, Associate Judge for the Albany Diocesan Marriage Tribunal, the Diocesan Architecture and Buildings Commission, the Diocesan Presbyteral Council and College of Consultors, and the Diocesan Pastoral Planning Group. My only fear is that the diocese is making him idle. Lack of assignments. He has published a number of works on spirituality, sacramental theology, liturgy, Christian anthropology, mission and evangelization, and the educational methods and techniques. It is my great honor to be able to introduce tonight for our final Theology and Culture of the semester, Father Anthony Barratt.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Just talking about the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, one of my privileges is that I can ride my horse into church. I'll get the Evangelist or other journals ready for that. Well, we have a kind of mountain to climb tonight, everybody. So just to explain, I hope people have the handouts. There's a sort of an overview of what we're going to do. We'll probably jump around a little bit. I always like to give that structure so you know what you're letting yourself in for. And, you know, I've had a long day. I don't know about you. So if you drift off into prayer at some stage and come back to earth, then you know exactly where we are. So they're very handy. And we also have a number of quotes which I will refer to, and you can look at those later. We also have the Caravaggio Road to Emmaus, and I thought that might be something, because what we talk about should lead us into prayer, of course, and so that might be something to use as something of a prayer aid. Amazing canvas, painted in about 1601 to 1602. I'm proud to say it is actually in the National Gallery in London, England, but it is a stunning piece. And I will allude to it here and there because we know that the Road to Emmaus is in a way a model of both Eucharist and evangelization. So without further ado, I'd like to begin, and you can follow where we are also on the handout. So I'd like to begin really with just some initial thoughts, as I say there. We know, of course, that the Eucharist, well, liturgy, but the Eucharist particularly, referred to as the source and summit. And if you look at the quotations there, I've put several of those in there from the Second Vatican Council and other places. It is the source and summit, of course. But it is also about mission and evangelization. Those of you who studied the Trinity, we might say that the Trinity is missionary. Those processions, that outpouring from the Godhead is something that gives us a model for evangelization. And I put at the bottom there the wonderful 3 quotes in the middle of our first page of quotations from River's book, which I would certainly recommend to you, From Maintenance to Mission, where he deals with both Eucharist and evangelization. just those quotes. The Eucharist is our finest moment as Catholics, and it is unlimited in its evangelizing power. It is the source and summit of evangelization. And my favorite quote, we eat and drink the body and blood of Christ in order to become the body and blood of Christ to the world. And he goes on, evangelization is not an add-on to the Eucharist. It is of itself an evangelizing experience. I think we know these things. So as I put there, what I would like to do is to offer something along the lines of what we might say Eucharistic evangelization or evangelizing Eucharistically. And so to do that, what I'd like to do, as I put there, is really a staged thing, really, in terms of levels. We want to describe what we're dealing with. We need to analyze that. What's the meaning, the context? What do we really mean? To pull that together, to synthesize, bring them together, integrate them. And then most importantly, because we can talk about these things all night. I don't propose to do that. I've got to get back to Hudson, but we need to apply it personally in our own heart, our own life, our own spirituality, but also pastorally, spiritually to others. It can't just be an inward-looking thing. So that is our aim and purpose tonight. So that's what I would like to do. So moving on, in all of the above, what I'd like to do is to grasp that and to apply it pastorally and so on, and to look at the landscape that we face as well. Now, all this, folks, needs energy and effort, which is, of course, why we're here tonight. And so I'd like to begin, as I put on the handout there, really just to look at our words, source and summit, both in terms of the Eucharist, of course, because we use that phrase so often. You know how you, like the Our Father, you sort of rattle it off on autopilot. I'm sure none of you do, but I mean, there's a danger. I'm speaking of myself. We use phrases like source and summit so easily. What do they mean? But also source and summit of evangelization as well, to bring those together in some way. That is what I'd like to do. But we need to step back and look at those. I love the saying, you cannot see a mountain if you're standing on it, because you're too close. You have to step back and see, and that's what I'd like to do. So just a few thoughts to start us. First of all, the summit. To get to the summit of something requires an effort, unless you cheat like on Mount Washington and drive up and get one of those bumper stickers, I drove Mount Washington, which I always think is a terrible cheat. I mean, I must admit, I went up on the Cog Railway, but you get to a summit requires effort in many ways. And I think Sacrosanctum Concilium number 11, it's our quote at the bottom of page 1, puts it beautifully. Notice what it says about the Eucharist as summit. That summit involves being fully aware, actively engaged, and then enriched by its effects going out. So those three things involve effort. But also the source. I often wonder what, say, Henry Hudson must have thought as he floated up the Hudson River all those years ago in this huge new land. Or I think of those people exploring to find the source of the River Nile. Again, great effort, and we might say courage as well, overcoming obstacles, a journey into the unknown that needs faith. So when we say the Eucharist is a summit and a source, I think we mean all those things together. To continue, there is an intimate connection or bond between Eucharist and evangelization. And why do I say that? Well, the answer, I think, is obvious to it. It is in the person of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is, of course, in every way, both the source and summit of so much. When you think about it, evangelization has as its center our Lord. Evangelization is from Christ and to Christ. And the USCCB, the US Bishops' Conference, on the next handout there, the second page, gives those three goals. But notice, and we'll come back to those, notice how they are very much about from Christ to Christ. So we have Christ as the center. The Eucharist is, of course, the real living presence of our Lord. So we might say that the Eucharist is the source and summit of evangelization. There's also a reciprocal relationship between Eucharist and evangelization, a dynamic, if you like, because the Eucharist feeds and nourishes evangelization. We express that, for example, at Mass. Those dismissals: go and announce the gospel of the Lord. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. We say that because we have encountered and received the Lord Eucharistically. And we know our word Mass, missa, means a mission, going out. It's not a cozy club. We go out there to bring the one whom we have received to others. But also evangelization also leads to the Eucharist. It directs people to that intimate encounter with our Lord. So I'd like to just unpack a little bit more what we mean by the Eucharist as source and summit of evangelization. First of all, it is the source. The Eucharist is the source of evangelization, or the motivator. How is that so? Because it is an encounter with Christ. The Eucharist leads us to proclaim him to others, and that's where our road to Emmaus comes in. Again, we haven't got time to go into that, but look at it maybe later on when we have adoration or another time of prayer. We meet Christ, we have to proclaim him. Do you remember those beautiful words of the two disciples, who are a bit dumb, to be honest? You know, it takes a long time for them to kind of get the message. Did not our hearts burn as he talked to us on the road? The Greek word is wonderful. It literally means ignite, like spontaneous combustion. Hopefully we've had that experience with the Eucharist. So the Eucharist does that for us, because we see Christ's evangelizing power in the Eucharist. It reveals that, it draws us into him, where our Lord breaks the bread. He opens their eyes. So we have that as the model in our evangelization and Eucharist, in that beautiful gospel. So just to give a quote, the Eucharist then is both the means by which Christ draws us to himself, and it is the fullest expression of the intimacy to which he draws us. I'd like to read that again, if you don't mind. The Eucharist then is both the means by which Christ draws us to himself, and it is the fullest expression of the intimacy to which he draws us. And the Eucharist not only reveals Christ's evangelizing power, but we can say the Eucharist is revelation itself. The Mass particularly does that, of course, in the first part of the Mass, but we think of the marvels God has done for us, the transformation where bread and wine are transformed into something else, that whole idea of calling, or the whole idea of sacrifice making holy. So in all those ways, very hurriedly, in this ministry, you must be examples of Christian living in faith and conduct. You must strive to grow in holiness through the sacrament of love and unity. Be therefore especially observant of the Lord's command to love your neighbor. So that gives us that first goal of seeing that in all Catholics, of, if you like, firing us up to bring about in all Catholics an enthusiasm for their faith. The Eucharist can do that because it is those things. But that second goal as well, what I often call, it's really a more invitational one, that is to encourage others to enter into that relationship. So again, there's a wonderful quote from our document that I've been using. That is, of course, from Pope Benedict's encyclical Sacramentum Caritatis. You've got a series of quotes there. He writes, "The love we celebrate in the Eucharist is not something we can keep to ourselves. By its very nature, it demands to be shared with all." if you want a statement about why the Eucharist or how the Eucharist is evangelizing, you have it there, I think. But we have our Lord's own words in John chapter 6, verse 51. The bread I will give you is my flesh for the life of the world. So the Eucharist fulfills that second goal. But then, as you can see, the third goal is actually to bring the Eucharist into culture, into society. It is a criterion for evaluating everything that we do as we encounter culture. And I do think this is a moment where we are right now after COVID, that people, we can wring our hands or shake our heads or do both at the same time and complain how terrible things are. And, it's good to vent occasionally. But I think our Lord is saying, yeah, but what are you going to do about it? And we have the gift of the Eucharist to bring to others. Again, it has to be what we would call a Eucharistic consistency. We need to bring that into politics, into all sorts of other areas of life. So there are those social implications of the Eucharist. I am often puzzled when politicians will say that their faith doesn't influence what they do. I don't see how you can leave your faith like an umbrella or a hat or as you go in somewhere. If the Eucharist is what we says it is, then that has to inform what we do, that third goal. So folks, I've rather gone through that quickly. I hope everyone's still with me. I just wanted to give you an overview of what we mean by source and summit with the Eucharist. And again, we know that, but we just need to be sure we know it, but also how the Eucharist is source and summit of evangelization. That's all I've tried to do in giving you some examples. Again, I should have said at the beginning, you have the quotes there. I give those to you, so if you do have time, I know we're busy, you can take those with you and kind of reflect on those and integrate those yourself. Well, having said all that, it's wonderful. Hopefully it sounds wonderful, but how does this happen? There is a dynamic, as I put there, of evangelizing Eucharistically. I'm very indebted to Sherry Waddell's book. If people come across this, Forming Intentional Disciples. I don't have shares in her organization or anything, or in the book, royalties, but I would recommend it to you. She points out that if we're trying to apply what we've just said to evangelization, then there are actually stages that people go through on that spiritual journey. And the Eucharist is, in a way, food for each of those stages. So you have them outlined there. We often, for example, have that initial trust. And we have the model of our Lord, who often engages with people, that sort of desire. So the Eucharist, if people see in us a Eucharistic person, I'd like to suggest then that there might be that sense of trust. Does that make sense? If we are living what we say the Eucharist is, then I think that's an initial stage that may attract somebody to make that first step of a sort of initial trust. They trust us. What we say, how we live isn't bogus. It doesn't contradict what the Eucharist is, the sacrament of love. This is so crucial. And I think so many people are turned off. They don't have that. They have a distrust because there is a disjuncture. That's all we're saying. Sherry Waddell points out that's so essential, that first stage, because everything can fall so easily in that first stage. The second stage she calls spiritual curiosity. People often say, I'm spiritual, but not religious. I never know quite what on earth that means, but, I was talking about this with the students at Siena today, actually. But we have that spiritual curiosity. And we have the model in Jesus, actually. I love this statistic. I didn't look this up myself. I cheated. According to a writer I read, in the New Testament, Jesus is asked 183 questions. He gave 3 direct answers and answered 307 questions with a question. So we have that sense of a spiritual curiosity. And maybe unlike tonight, no one yawned when Jesus spoke. They were excited. There was a curiosity. He excited that in them. How do we do that? Have you ever had that experience where people have come and seen a mass, maybe they're visiting, and there's something curious about this? A few weeks ago, we had adoration down in Hudson, and a group of young people were just visiting the church. It's a beautiful church. And they weren't Catholic, particularly church or anything. And they said, what's going on in that chapel? And I said, oh, well, this is adoration. And I was about to, typical priest, theologian, go into some great long explanation about adoration and the real presence. And they just said, we just sensed something special. So, you kind of think, wow, shut up and just let them experience it. So there is that spiritual curiosity. Then the spiritual openness. This is the transition point to becoming a disciple, where we begin to be open to that relationship with the Lord. And you know how often that might happen, trying to put this Eucharistically, is in adoration. We have some of our dear discerners and seminarians who are kind of with us in the other room and elsewhere. I'm amazed how often adoration was a moment when something happened, that spiritual openness. So I think, if we talk about evangelizing Eucharistically, that's part of our secret weapon. Then there's spiritual seeking, where people seek that relationship with our Lord. And what could be more intimate in a way than the Eucharist? There's a wonderful passage in Sherry Waddell's book. I'd like to just read it to you. I'm just so conscious of time, and we did start a little bit late. Talking about the I generation. She writes, a contemporary culture does not provide the average I-gen with a profound grasp of what is right and wrong, apart from the conviction that assaulting the self is wrong. But when they come to experience adoration, something happens. They have a sense of the presence of God. It's inexplicable, but it is there. So I think that evidence is there. Finally, we have that intentional discipleship, where we have that engagement with our Lord. So over the page, how can we evangelize Eucharistically? So first we have to take account of those stages. Where is someone in that journey? And it's not just people who are coming for the RCIA or who are looking, initially. I think many Catholics might be at different stages in that journey, yes? So we need to take that seriously. Well, I've put there are various models that we can follow in terms of how we evangelize Eucharistically. There is the St. Stephen's model, which is basically witness like St. Stephen did. So again, that's how we need to witness. Do we witness Eucharistically? This is a very powerful way of evangelizing. Someone once said to me, Catholics going to Mass on a Sunday look as though they're going to the dentist, and with the greatest respect to the dentist, when they emerge, they look as though they've just been to the dentist for a root canal or something like that. So I'm being mischievous, but are we witnessing? That's St. Stephen's model. There is a Jerusalem model that Barratt calls it, which is basically that liturgical model. So do we celebrate the liturgy and the Eucharist, worthily and well? Is that the case? There's the proclamation model. We think of parish missions and so on. And again, we can see how the Eucharist is revelatory. I think we forget this, dear friends, that the Eucharist is, of course, the presence of our Lord, body, blood, soul, and divinity, but it is also didactic. It's teaching, it's revelatory. It reveals God's love. It reveals who our Lord is. We forget that, the power of the Eucharist to teach. So that model, that proclamation teaching model. There is also the fraternal model too of community, where we need to make sure that when the Eucharist is celebrated, that it is actually building up that sense of community. Every parish considers itself welcoming. I've never met a parish who says we're unwelcoming. Probably I wouldn't have been welcomed if I had, if you see what I mean. But, you know, the question is, are we actually welcoming? Are the things we do, for example, in the celebration of the Eucharist, that are unintentionally excluding others? So we need to have that sense of fellowship and fraternity. There is also what's often called the Areopagus Model. That's, you know, the center of cultural life and so on, where we need to, if you like, take what we believe elsewhere. And finally, the loaves and fishes model, which is charity and service. The Eucharist, as Pope Francis reminds us again and again, has to lead to love and service and outreach. Yes, it is a sacrament of charity. You know, Lord, when did I see you? And so on, Matthew 25. Again, folks, I'm going through those models quickly, but what I want not to get bogged down in the detail, but just to see how there are the different approaches or ways. So just as there are different stages to evangelization, and the Eucharist connects with that, there are also different ways or models of evangelizing, of which the Eucharist is a crucial part. So to summarize, if we wanted to look at, there are 4 Eucharistic elements in evangelization. And if we want to evangelize Eucharistically, we need to make sure all 4 of these are present. There's koinonia, that is friendship, welcome, Eucharistic hospitality. After all, we do talk about a holy communion, which I always like to remind people is both vertical, of course, but is also horizontal. And that makes sure that that's there. The second one is diaconia, that is the service to others. So that we've, as we said, that the Eucharist takes us to love and serve others. There is the kerygma, the proclamation, that we are led to the person of Jesus Christ, that the Eucharist helps us do that. And finally, there is the idea of thanksgiving and praise, that we are stewards of what we have. Our gospel today, whether I got to weekday mass today, the 10 lepers is an example of thanksgiving. Do you remember the difference at the end of the gospel? All 10 were cured of leprosy, but only one was saved because he gave thanks. And the Eucharist is, as you know, means thanksgiving. So we have to do that too. We have to have that attitude of thanksgiving. So to me, the summarizing how we can evangelize Eucharistically. Folks, we're on the home stretch. And again, I do apologize for running through things. I don't want to keep people too late. And today, I should have said too, is a kind of overview, a taster, just to get us to think what I want us to do. My aim for tonight, I'm sure you do this already, is to make that connection between Eucharist and evangelization, evangelizing Eucharistically or Eucharistic evangelization, that the two are intimately bound together, as we'll conclude in just a few minutes. So I've put there, evangelizing Eucharistically, doing what we do, but with a new focus, a new method and approach. It's not like we've reinvented the Eucharist or we've reinvented evangelization. It's a perspective that hopefully we develop. Does that make sense to everyone? It's really about a mindset inside us to change. So to finish, I'd like to talk about barriers and obstacles and then positive things. So we do have both those elements. So how can we evangelize with this new method? Well, first of all, I'd like to suggest that the Eucharist is a perfect antidote to a number of very negative things present in our culture. And again, I go back to that thing that, you know, we can complain or we can bemoan things, and I do it. It's good to vent, especially over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. You know, we put the whole world to rights, and if only people would listen to what we said, everything would be fine. You know, isn't that wonderful? But anyway, because I think our culture is rather toxic, either intentionally, which is sometimes true, but often unintentionally. And I think the Eucharist offers a we can offer that as a kind of antidote to that negativity. And one of the things I think, particularly at the moment after COVID, I have a thing, you know, we talk about road rage. Now, none of us in this room or watching anywhere are ever guilty of road rage, right? Of course not. But I talk about COVID rage. I think there is a thing called COVID rage. People are so worn down, fearful, tense, being cooped up, many other things. It's like a spring, you know, it's just going to go any moment. I believe the Eucharist can be a wonderful antidote to that. So just quickly to go through those, to offer some of those. The first thing is, I think it's an antidote to cynicism and a loss of a sense of otherness. So, for example, I think sometimes, you know, we avoid reality. And I was sharing with Dr. Coleman, there's a wonderful view, a wonderful quote from somebody that the Eucharist, you know, you can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. And I think the Eucharist is so real that it gives us a perspective on reality. A second element, I think, is that objectifying of people, that the Eucharist, by the way, I mentioned worldviews there. We have a number of worldviews in conflict. I think the Eucharist offers us a worldview. You know what I mean by worldview? Yes, it's our inner kind of how we apprehend the world, how we kind of unpack the world, how we understand the world, how we approach it. There are different world views. There's a wonderful book that, I don't know where I brought it with me actually, that deals with that. But anyway, so having a Eucharistic worldview, I think, would be wonderful, where we accept the sense of mystery, communion, and so on. But another toxic thing is, I think, what we might call a objectifying of people, where people are seen as objects. We know that, narcissism. And of course, we have that perfect gift of our Lord in the Eucharist, which is the antidote to that, a sense of gift. What we are, who we are, is gift. We also live in a consumer culture. There's a wonderful book called The McDonaldization of culture, whereas we realize that the Eucharist is not a commodity, it's not a consumer thing, it's not about me bringing Jesus into my life, but Jesus opening me to his life. St. Augustine, I had to get Augustine in somewhere tonight, yes. Sorry, Thomas hasn't got a look in yet, but we'll get there. Augustine, you know, makes that wonderful point that ordinary food we take into our bodies to digest becomes kind of part of us. The Eucharist, the opposite happens. We become like the one we receive. Very important. So it's a perfect antidote to me to what I would call that consumer, I guess, yeah, consumer culture. I put a couple of the quotes there, friends, if you want to look at that later on. That from Chaput's book, Things Worth Dying For. It's a wonderful book. We haven't got time to go into those. The Eucharist is also a wonderful antidote to that sense of a division and lack of coherence. It is the sacrament of unity, that what joins us together is greater than what divides. The Eucharist is also a sacrament of hope. I think we often don't talk about hope enough. Can you imagine life without hope? The Eucharist is the ultimate sacrament of hope when you think about it. It points to our future. It is a foretaste and promise of the Paschal feast of heaven. So we have that sense of hope, of journey, if you like, that new reality. And again, if you want to look later on, I put a couple of quotes in there from Chaput's book about that, which I think just gives that beautiful sense of that. And finally, the Eucharist also overcomes what we might call limited perspectives, that the Eucharist brings past, present, and future together. So we have that sense in the Eucharist of a sense of mystery and sacrifice in a world where those two words are often not used. But it is the sacrament of those, very much so. Just to be anecdotal, because we're on the home stretch, so I'm going to finish in about 3 minutes, I think. A survey was done fairly recently of younger people, the 18 to 30 age cohort, and they were asked about religion. And the summary basically was most people saw religion as moralistic, therapeutic deism. Moralistic, you know, do's and don'ts, but divorced from why. The Eucharist tells us why. It's a sacrament of love. Therapeutic, feeling good about myself, which is good, of course, but the danger is you lose a sense of gift. And deism, as I'm sure you know, is that, you know, God kind of set the world going and they said, oh, see you at the end, you know, have fun, everybody. It's that distancing, not a personal God. So the Eucharist is highly personal, highly relational. It is the antidote to a moralistic, therapeutic deism. So just to finish, what I also included there are two quotes. Is it okay if I go for another 2 minutes? Again, I've rather rushed it and I do apologize, but I think you get the main line. So I'm going to do a recap. The Eucharist is the sacrament of love and the sacrament of evangelization. And I'm finishing with two quotes that I think encapsulate that. And what I hope we'll be able to do in our time of adoration is for you to kind of process, myself as I'm driving back, what we've been talking about. And again, I'll recap. But if you look at that first rather lengthy quote from Pope Benedict's encyclical Sacramentum Caritatis, the sacrament of charity, it's on that third page. And again, just to look at it, I want to highlight a few things. The love that we celebrate in the sacrament is not something we can keep to ourselves. And the punchline, I love the way have you ever heard him speak? You know, it's always kind of so gentle, and then you suddenly stop and think, oh my goodness, you know, it's like the punchline, but it's delivered so, you know, kind of, oh yeah, politely. By its very nature, it demands to be shared with all. What the world needs is God's love. It needs to encounter Christ. And the Eucharist is thus the source and summit, not only of the Church's life, but also of her mission. An authentically Eucharistic church is a missionary church. So we must be able to tell our brothers and sisters with conviction, that which we have seen and heard we proclaim also to you, so that you may have fellowship with us. Truly, nothing is more beautiful than to know Christ and to make him known to others. The institution of the Eucharist, for that matter, anticipates the very heart of Jesus's mission. At the Last Supper, Jesus entrusts his disciples the sacrament, which makes present his self-sacrifice. So, the final line, we cannot approach the Eucharistic table without being drawn into the mission, which, beginning in the very heart of God, is meant to reach all. The Eucharist is evangelizing, and we evangelize Eucharistically. And just a quote there from St. Teresa of Calcutta, you know, we go into that Eucharist, that real presence of Jesus, to the real presence of Jesus. I love that phrase, in the heavy disguise of the poorest of the poor, in those that no one seems to love or care about. So we have that sense that the Eucharist is also reaching out to those in need. So a quick summary, and then we will finish. We want to have a few questions, hopefully, and a time of prayer together. What I've tried to do tonight in very hurried way, very brief way, is just to hopefully not introduce you, but at least to have that sense of viewing evangelization. I think we all think, yes, you know, we need to evangelize, right? I don't think anyone in this room or watching would disagree with that. The $64,000 question is, how the heck do we do that? That's not a theological statement, but it's kind of a cry from the heart. I think the Eucharist gives us that, but to do it, we have to understand it as the source and summit. We also have to take seriously stages where people are. That's why I was going to omit that, but I thought, no, we need to recognize that those stages, I think that Sherry Waddell gives very helpful. We need to be aware of different ways that we can do it, those different models, St. Stephen model or whichever model it is, and then bring that together by realizing, to me, that the Eucharist is a wonderful positive gift, and it is an antidote, to use that word, to so much. It is the best antiviral drug that we have with that. But it is, because it will encounter, if we do it properly and we celebrate the Eucharist and bring it properly, it is that wonderful gift of God that nothing can surpass in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father Barratt. You have a water to your left. Please. And we do have time for a brief Q&A. As I asked you in the chat, please post your questions in the chat function. You can scroll down to the bottom of your screen, type the questions, and then we will say them here out loud to the microphone so that everyone can hear them after reading them in the chat function. And once again, apologies for technical malfunctions. That was entirely our fault. We appreciate Father Barratt's presentation tremendously much. And so I'll lead off the chat and give people a chance to think and formulate their thoughts in relation to Father Barratt. So, Father Barratt, you mentioned 4 key elements to Eucharistic evangelization: koinonia, diaconia, kerygma, and Eucharistia. I'm just wondering, as someone, now this is a theology nerd asking a question to another theologian. So where do you...
I own being a theological nerd.
There you go. Yeah. So under which of those models do you suppose, I'm just thinking of my own liturgical theological training, under which of those models do you suppose anamnesis falls? So the Eucharist as making the past present by remembering, right? The wonderful Greek word anamnesis.
I would actually see it running through all of them, of course. Right. It has to, because when we say remembering, as we know, all of us, I think, it isn't just the mental thing. It is something that is lived. It's something real. It literally represents what we remember, and therefore I think that runs through all those things in obviously the different aspects of it. Yeah. For example, diaconia, where that idea of service. What better way to remember our Lord than to serve our brothers and sisters? It's no longer just words, it's action, for example. And that will be true of all those 4. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Questions, comments? Here locally. Questions?
I've reduced everyone to silence.
Well, and if you said, then if you're not near a microphone, I will repeat your question for the microphone so that everyone can hear. You've reduced everyone to silence.
Well, folks, there's a lot there, but again, as I am repeating myself, but all I want to do really is to it's a very big topic. And just to have, I read a wonderful book actually about, from not maintenance to mission, but how a parish would be more mission orientated rather than maintenance. And there was a chart of, I just remember this, there was a chart of 7 kind of typical parish activities, and they're the same activities kind of in a maintenance mode, more inward looking. And then they showed the same 7, pretty much, well, they were the same 7, but with a mission orientation. So it wasn't like you were doing something different, but you were doing it differently, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what I would want to communicate tonight too. But to do that, we do have to step back and don't just go charging in. It's Martha and Mary. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a both and. It's my favorite gospel, by the way, Martha and Mary. So, yeah.
Can I ask a question? So, so it seems, why do we have this idea in some way in our brain that because we receive a gift, then we need to tell other people, and these 2 phases are separated in time? Yeah. It seems to me that what you were telling us tonight is that it's like something that is a dialogue. I mean, it's something that, being missionary, also you understand better the Eucharist, and the Eucharist also is a relationship. I mean, why do we have this mindset that, okay, because we receive a gift, so we need to go, and it's some kind of moralistic way, right? So why is this happening?
But I think yeah, exactly that. There's a dynamic, isn't there? It just has to be shared. This is what, because the Eucharist transforms us too. Yes, so we become like the one we receive, and if that transformation has happened, then there's like an imperative. I think we have to then, and we do that above all, I think, as we were talking about tonight, by living. So I would say, Eucharistic evangelization, or if you like, being Eucharistic people. So really everything we do, it's not something, we know it's not just something we do on in the church or when we go to mass. I mean, that's there, but it has to be something that spills out. And therefore it has to be just something we do naturally. It's a natural thing. But I think sometimes too in our culture, we don't want to impose, quite rightly so. We don't want to be seen, like a religious nut or something either. But, we have to do that.
Can you give an example of someone who lives Eucharistically out loud, but does it well without looking like a nut?
Well, I would go back to someone like, some of the saints, Saint Teresa. Where in her particular way, and again, if you notice, sometimes if we can't do everything, it's in that particular way. And I always remember that story, the poor sisters who were running around and they were so busy, I'm sure you've heard the story. And saying, mother, you want us to have an hour of adoration. Well, we haven't got time for that. She said, well, if you're so busy, you can do it for 2 hours then. And they did, and things somehow happened. I think the point she was making, was exactly that it, so to me, she would be a person. It's one of my great things. I studied in Rome. That was wonderful enough, but the Missionaries of Charity actually had one of their main houses there, and I had a year as a priest. So I would go out to say mass sometimes, and there was Mother Teresa right there. So, how do you preach in front of a saint, for example? But it was a wonderful experience. Yeah. So I hope that's answered. But I know parishioners like that too. You just, the minute they leave mass, they're living Eucharistically. And I don't want to be negative, but the bad side of that would be, we go out for brunch afterwards, and oh my goodness, did you see that person there with that ridiculous hat on, and and so there's a bit of a disjuncture there. So I think it's something we just get into eventually. Yeah, that witness.
Well, we have a question in the chat. What is the best way to evangelize Catholics who may not appreciate the Eucharist, especially after the COVID shutdown, where many did not receive the Eucharist and have not returned to church? Similarly, those lapsed Catholics who have actively rejected the Eucharist.
We're taking that first question first. If anyone has a solution to that, I know Bishop Scharfenberger and all the other bishops and priests and everyone, I think, will be very glad to. But
copyright the solution.
Well, it is it's a very vital question. I would hope that through the use of Zoom or media and other things, you could draw people back. It is amazing how often people come back in the end, and it is because they miss the Eucharist. I don't mean just watching the Mass. I mean actually because there is something in that encounter. We know that, of course. And I think ditto with certainly I found with some Catholics who've no longer practicing their faith particularly, or have gone to another church. In Hudson, we have the Rock Solid Church, which is a very evangelical, very dynamic church. But sometimes that will be the same thing. They would just somehow, it's instinctive, I think, miss that. And it's not because they miss the ritual, or maybe that's true, but I think they realize instinctively, somehow in their heart, what they're missing, or who they're missing, I should say more accurately. It's not a very good answer to a very good question, but I think that's something that we all struggle with, and that really is a crucial thing. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Father Barratt. And with that, yes, so the key is make the Eucharist at the center. Of course, it already is. Right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Father Barratt, for your presentation tonight. We appreciate it so greatly. And for all of you watching here and in Zoom land, again, we have a virtual open house a week from today, but we just want to thank everyone who's attended the Theology and Culture series, especially those who've attended from here at Albany, both today, last month, the month before. We appreciate it greatly. Thank you, and we very much love and care for the support that you've shown us here at St. Bernard's this year. Thank you. And as my colleague Marco would say, what? Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.